Heads up, the following section will probably be like a little bit messed up just because the audio got corrupted, I think. So there's a chance that some of the audio won't connect with my mouth. That's because I had to re-record the audio. So yeah. Welcome to this week's episode of MJ's Whimsical Writings, and today I'm old, and the passage of time is inevitable. So before I worry about my life and my mortality, let's talk about books I read as a kid. When I was little, I read a lot, like a lot. When I was in my prime, I would be able to burn through a 300-page book in less than 3 hours, which I don't think is very commendable now, but as a kid, that was celebratory. Once I turned 13, I kind of stopped reading as much as I did when I was younger, since I was given a phone and full access to the internet. Once I started college, though, I decided to get back into reading. After all, there's not much to do in college other than stress about your grades and wish for the sweet release of death. As exams are coming up, I find myself ruminating on the books I read as a kid. My taste in literature has come a long way. When I was little, I would only read books with pictures in them. While everyone in my grade was reading stuff like Harry Potter or Warrior Cats, I was still reading comic books at the ripe age of 13. Nowadays, I read trashy romance novels for fun. Comic books, at least to me, were easier to digest. It was fun watching the characters do certain actions, rather than having to visualize them in your head. Basically, what I'm saying was that I was a lazy bum when I was younger. So, I took 10 books/series I read as a kid, and today I'm going to talk about them. So let's jump right into it, shall we? By the way, get ready to be blasted back into the late 2000s and early 2010s. I remember this book series being available in my elementary school library. It's kind of in the same vein as Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries, where some young girl writes in her diary about her eccentric life. I think this was in the sequel series, but I remember one of the side characters, Isabella, shoving ground up coffee in her armpits. I can't remember why she did that. Oh, I also remember that the main character had a beagle that looked like it hated life. The main character kept calling it ugly, too. I like how I remember one of the side characters' names, but not the main character's name. Oh, and I remember that the book got adapted into a movie, and it would play on YTV a lot. For my non-Canadian viewers, YTV is basically like Nickelodeon. I really liked this book series as a kid, to the point where I ended up getting a diary myself. My favorite book from the series was Me! Just like you, only better. Ah, yes. A classic. A real classic. Screw all these old-timey books we were forced to read in school. This is a real literary classic. You all know the synopsis already. I don't need to explain what the plot of Diary of a Wimpy Kid is. A downright sociopathic middle schooler causes mayhem amongst his classmates and family in each book. However, I think a lot of people can agree that Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of fell off after a certain point. I personally stopped reading at Double Down, the 11th book, but this series was losing its edge even before that point. Not to say that Diary of a Wimpy Kid is a bad franchise. It was actually pretty good in its prime, and who can forget the movies? They were so funny. Yep, those 3 movies were definitely classics. The trilogy was just fantastic. And then, there were no more movies. It's tragic, but it's best to let a trilogy rest in infamy. Picking a favorite book is kind of hard with this series because, like I said, the first 8 or so books were actually pretty good. I'd say The Third Wheel and Hard Luck are tied as my favorite books in the series. Now this is my jam. Throw me into the gallows all you want, but Big Nate still holds up to this day. The comics themselves are extremely funny, and even the books were good at telling an engaging story for children. I definitely appreciate Big Nate more as an adult, because there's a lot of pop culture references that just went over my head when I was younger. The comics are mostly episodic, but there are times where there'll be a story spanning multiple comic issues. Like when Nate is trying to get with the cool kid, Marcus, and he slowly realizes that Marcus and his gang are just bullies who like picking on others. And the side characters are all really enjoyable too, and they all get their time in the spotlight. Francis is Nate's best friend, who is smart and also a neat freak. Teddy is, well, he's kind of just a stereotypical friend of color, but he's still pretty funny. There's Dee Dee, who's eccentric and wants to be an actress, and Chad is fat and a complete softie who gets all the girls due to his sheer kindness and empathy. The gang's all here. And the little doodles from Nate in some of the comics and books were so cute. Big Nate really inspired me to start drawing when I was younger. Unfortunately, it never really went anywhere. I still draw like a 2-year-old. My favorite book is probably either Big Nate Goes for Broke or Big Nate Blasts Off. Heads up, I'm going to be really annoying in this segment. Raina Telgemeier is, no joke, my favorite author, period. The way she tackles subjects and makes them kid-friendly is something scientists need to analyze in a lab. Subjects like getting your braces, going on family trips, having emetophobia don't sound inherently heavy on paper. But Raina manages to tackle these subjects in ways children can relate to and understand. However, when she does tackle heavy topics like death and the supernatural, she does so in a way that is simple enough for children to understand, but complex enough for adults to understand as well. This woman definitely does her homework when it comes to topics she writes about. I'm just going to get it out of the way. Smile is my favorite book from her best work, period, and my favorite book of all time. Yeah, it's time to get really annoying. As someone who had braces for nearly 8 years, Smile is the most relatable book I have ever read. Having braces, especially when you're young, does a lot to your self-image and confidence, and Raina explains that perfectly in both words and drawings. Not only that, but she manages to effectively tell a good side story on how friends shouldn't put you down. This was all from Raina's personal experience with friends and braces when she was younger, and she manages to explain to children that friends should be supportive of you, not toxic and cruel. God, I love Smile. I could do a whole video on Smile if I wanted to. Honestly, I might. That, or I'll make an article on my Medium page. The link to my Medium page will be in the description. When I say the Babysitters Club, I don't mean the regular novels. I mean the graphic novels that started in the 2010s. Funnily enough, Raina also drew and wrote the first few volumes of the Babysitters Club before it started to rotate different artists and authors. The Babysitters Club is about a group of girls who start a babysitting agency in their neighborhood. Again, like every other book I read when I was younger, this series made me want to start babysitting. I know, I'm predictable as hell. Throw the tomatoes. This book series is still ongoing, but I haven't read any of the new books since the 13th volume. My favorite girl from the club is Marianne, since I could relate to her feelings of inadequacy and shyness when I was younger. My least favorite was Claudia, since I thought she was a little bit snobbish. Most people would say that their favorite book from this series are the first 5 volumes, and they're right to think so. But I'm going to throw a little curveball here. My favorite book from this series is Jessie's Secret Language. It's a really cute story about a girl learning how to use ASL for a young boy that she's babysitting. It's very wholesome. Archie comics are a straight-up classic amongst comic book readers. It doesn't have a world-ending plot or bombastic fight scenes, but it has some of the most realistic depictions of teenagers that I've ever witnessed. One thing to note about the characters in Archie is that no one is specifically a bad person. They're just people with differing circumstances. Veronica is a snobby rich girl, sure, but there are times where she desires to be a normal girl like everyone else. And even though she's snobby, she's never cruel towards other people. Jughead might seem like a lazy slacker who eats all the time, but he's deeply loyal to the people he cares about. Archie might seem like a clumsy fool who only gets into trouble, but he usually gets in trouble because he's at the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, I think the Archie name has kind of been soiled by the Netflix show Riverdale. And honestly, that's a real shame, because every character in the Archie universe is done way better in the comics than in the show. Now, of course, we must bring up the elephant in the room. Betty or Veronica. When I was little, I was definitely more partial to Betty because she was nicer and had that girl next door vibe to her. But nowadays, I really like Veronica. Not only do I think she's more attractive than Betty, but she's just funnier than Betty, and I like her solo storylines a lot. With Archie comics, it's a bit hard to say what my favorite Archie volume is, mainly because there's so many and each character gets their own time in the spotlight. But whenever I can, I always try and grab issues that focus on Betty and Veronica. And now we're on to the real classics, the stuff you probably had to read in school. It's unfortunate because I think if you had to read these last 4 books in school, your opinion on them would sour due to having to read them for a grade. But for me, I read them of my own volition. And Little Women is similar to genres I like to read about. Honestly, Little Women is more of a slice of life than anything else. It's about these four sisters and their transitions from little girls to young women. It also takes place during the American Civil War, so although the story is mostly light, the characters are always reminded of the situation that they're in. I think there is a plotline where one of the sisters was in love with someone. Honestly, I can't quite remember. It's been so long since I've read this book, but when I first read it, I found it to be pretty good. I still have the book. Maybe I should reread it sometime. Sorry to all you Moby Dick fans, but to me, Moby Dick is overrated. I mean, it's just some boring story about catching a whale. What's so interesting about it? Even as a kid, I remember that the book was a slog to get through. If you were to ask me the synopsis of this book, I genuinely would not be able to tell you. None of the characters were memorable. I don't remember the plot. It's a bit of a stinker, if I'm being honest. 1 out of 10, would not read again. This is another classic that, like Little Women, I think is really good. It's about this little girl whose family dies, so she has to live with her uncle. She doesn't like it there at first, but then she finds a boy hiding in the house and he shows her a secret garden. And honestly, that's all I really remember from this book. But I remember reading this book for the first time and genuinely enjoying myself, unlike when I was reading Moby Dick. Come to think of it, I think I only read Moby Dick because it had Dick in the title. Anyway, not much to say about this one because, unfortunately, I can't remember most of it, which is a real shame because I remember quite liking this book as a kid. The last book on this list, though, I could talk about it for hours. This is it, my favorite classical book. No joke, the moment I finished reading Anne of Green Gables when I was younger, I immediately fell in love with it. Anne Shirley is adorable and precious, Marilla is a hard ass at first, but grows to love Anne, and Matthew is the heart of the story, making sure the two other characters are happy and well. Anne, though, is my favorite character in the story. She is imaginative, particular about her appearance, and she hates boys. She just like me for real. No, but in all seriousness, Anne reminds me of Anya from Spy Family, a young orphan girl who, despite being kind of a gremlin, desperately wants to keep her newfound family together, so she doesn't have to go back into the orphanage. Plus, the book is set in Canada, Prince Edward Island to be exact. What's not to love? I actually went to the replica house in PEI a few years ago with my family, and the attention to detail in each room was super cool. I know L.M. Montgomery wrote a few books in the Anne of Green Gables universe, but personally, I haven't read any of them, and I don't think I plan to. I think Anne of Green Gables is a masterpiece, and I'm perfectly fine with not knowing how it all ends. And that's all I have to say about the books I read as a kid. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please check out my writing blog where I talk about books, writing tips, and other things. Feel free to subscribe and like the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye!